Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a add-on to the last video that I did with the concerning the sheep, wolves, and shepherds. I didn't really explain the wolf enough. The wolf is it could be your coworker, it could be a family member. The wolves are just almost as prevalent as sheep are. They're everywhere. A wolf, for instance, is, I'll give an example of someone from work. So, where I used to work, we worked as a group, and we had, a job that we were supposed to get done, and the job had different aspects to it that required an individual to do certain parts of the job. And some of those parts of the job could be more difficult than other parts of the job. And so the more quiet and docile members of the group would end up being the ones that get stuck with the harder parts of the job more often. We did rotate, but the problem is because of breaks and because of lunch and stuff like that, the rotations would be done unfairly because the same individuals would be rotated through the areas that were more difficult at the same time every day, and they ended up having to do the crappier parts of the job for more parts, definitely a lot more hours through the entire week than the other individuals would. And so there was approximately 5 of us, and one was the boss, and the other 4 were, the sub bosses. And what would happen is these 2 individuals happened to be wolves in the group, and they were always trying to manipulate me and another employee that was there. But the thing is, I happened to be a shepherd, so then when they tried to manipulate me, it would usually backfire and cause them to be, frustrated, or it just simply wouldn't work. I wouldn't do what they were asking me to do through coercion or through, manipulation. And sometimes that would result with us having a conference with the supervisors, or managers, I should say, because they were trying to overstep. So they learned real quickly not to try to manipulate me because I was a shepherd. Well, the problem is then they would try to manipulate the other individual in our group who happened to be a sheep. Okay, this person was a people pleaser. This person didn't want to cause any trouble. So he pretty much just did what people told him to do. And so I saw this and I didn't like it. It was like, you guys are taking advantage of this guy. And this guy isn't willing to stand up for himself. So I would stand up for him to push these wolves back from each other. Now these wolves would constantly fight each other for positions of power when the boss wasn't around, or if the boss wasn't working that day. They would constantly be fighting each other about who was in charge and who was the boss. And me being a shepherd, I wanted to pretty much just keep to myself and do my part of the job, and also watch over the sheep that we had in the group. And also we would have temporary workers that would come in, and a lot of times, they were basically designated sheep regardless of the type of person they were, simply because they were temps. They weren't full-time employees, so they were expected to do the grunt work anyway. But even then, we would have temps that would be with us for months on end, and I would start shepherding them, trying to protect them from the 2 wolves that we had in the group. They were constantly trying to manipulate and to make other people actually work harder than they needed to be because of the fairness of the rotation. The people that were actually manipulating should have been doing their part of the job more often. That was difficult. But that just wasn't in their nature, right? They're going to make someone else do it. And so that's an example of a wolf. A wolf isn't necessarily like, I guess apparently this wolf, sheep, and shepherd thing is actually in the Bible stories and things where they talk about Jesus as the shepherd and all this stuff. I'm not even comparing this to that. This is my own made up thing in my head that I have realized on my own. In fact, I didn't even know there was a Christian relationship to the sheep shepherd and stuff. I knew that Jesus was the shepherd, but I never knew who the wolf was. And apparently the wolf was supposed to be Satan. Well, in this case, the wolves are people, okay? Shepherds are people, okay? And the sheep are people, okay? There's no divine power that I'm talking about in this analogy. This is about the types of people there are in the world, okay? And so, I use that work personal experience to help get people to understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about wolves. So you know who they are. They're the ones that are always bossing people around. They're the ones that are always manipulating the system. They're the ones that act like they're in charge, but yet they aren't. Those are wolves, when they're wanting to manipulate someone else's life or work or anything. Those are wolves. Okay, most politicians are wolves. There are some shepherds in the political world, but most of them are wolves. And then, of course, lawyers. Okay, lawyers could possibly be shepherds and wolves, most likely wolves. But even in your own family members, you can have family members that take advantage of your family and rip your family off and steal behind your guys' backs. They're in great numbers, just like sheep. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. So for another example, there was another shift that had a boss there who was taking extended long breaks. Okay, the employees of that shift, I had to actually stay after one day, and I ended up working with these employees, and they would tell me about how this employee would take double time breaks, right? Like, so instead of 10 minutes, he would take 20 minutes, or instead of 30 minutes, he'd be gone for an hour, and stuff like that. And this was like all the time. This was like really often. So what happened is that they ended up having to sign out for breaks, right? So the managers were like, well, we can't have that, so we're just going to make everyone sign their name before they go to break, because that way we can keep tabs on whether or not they're cheating the system. And so then that manager, or that boss, the boss of the group of people from that shift, then came to us during changeover time and wanted to know whether or not we had to sign out for breaks. And I was like, no, our shift doesn't have to do that. Because the people in our shift were honest when it came to taking breaks. We didn't take extended long breaks because we watched each other and we let each other know that, hey, we understand that you're going to have a phone call or something that's going to happen and you might be a little late. But when it becomes a habitual problem where you're constantly gone longer than you should be, then that's a problem and it needs to be dealt with. And we usually did. And the reason is because I was a shepherd. Now, on this other shift, though, most of the people there were sheep. But they had one particular individual that was a wolf. So those poor people were being manipulated and mistreated by this wolf often. And also, this wolf would actually manipulate the system to where the system would not work as efficiently as it could. And it required the manual labor parts of the job to be more strenuous. And this one particular individual that was working that shift started complaining about having overuse issues with their body. And I had identified the issue because even on our shift we started having overuse issues. And so I had confronted this boss / boss of the shift, Wolf, from the other shift. And I said, what's going on? Why do you manipulate those numbers in the system to make your employees work harder? And he goes, well, because we have to make a budget. That's the only way. And I'm like, no, you don't have to do that. Our shift doesn't do that. We set the numbers like this. Therefore, it requires less manual labor for us to actually accomplish the task and easily make budget in the same time. Well, he didn't want to hear that. He's like, nope. And so what happened is this individual on their shift got injured because of overuse issues. And so I had brought it up to him. I said, dude, you're injuring your fellow employees because of this ridiculous idea that you have. And so then he didn't want to hear it. Right? He was upset at that point. He was like, no, I'm not. And he was kind of a dummy. And he had been working there for quite a while. And he had always caused a lot of issues with the equipment because he would manipulate the numbers and manipulate the settings. And it would actually cause lots of other issues in other parts of the plant. So I was basically calling him out on this because this is where it crossed the line. I got to the point where, look, dude, you're actually making it harder for your sheep to do their job. And then I approached him about the break thing. And this guy is well known for taking super long breaks. And he says, no, I don't. I don't take super long breaks. And so basically this guy, never did anything wrong, right? This guy had this picture of himself as being perfect. Well, anyway, he was lying to my face, literally. And so I didn't like that. So I got pissed. I said, look, buddy, I said, you're full of shit. I said, and he says, we're going to go to HR. So he ends up going to HR. And guess what? Guess what? I got in trouble. Yep, I got in trouble. He can even after the reprimand that I got because I got angry at him. They didn't do a thing about his behavior at all. They didn't care about his long breaks. They didn't do anything about the numbers that he was changing on the equipment and creating the workload to be increased with the fellow employees. And that was like the beginning of the end for me at that location working for that particular company. Because I realized that these guys wanted to prop up the wolves and to demonize the shepherds. Okay? I was standing up for an employee that was being abused by another employee. But did I get it? Did I get a pat on the back for anything? Nope. I was the bad guy because I was the one that got upset and brought tears to the eyes of this wolf. And this wolf ran off. And the HR lady's like, well, you don't know what's going on in his personal life. And it's like, that's no excuse. There is no excuse for him doing what he's doing to his fellow employees. And yet you guys sit there and act like there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. And that just shows the ignorance and the disconnect between the people that actually do the job and the corporate people that sit up in the office. So anyway, I just wanted to add that to this discussion about wolves, sheep, and shepherds, because it just solidifies the idea of me saying that the people who do the right thing are demonized and are considered the bad guy, while the people that commit crimes and do bad things are propped up. This society, this world we live in is freaking ass backwards. Yeah, and in conclusion, that character that I called out and he ended up running to HR, well, guess what happened to that guy? Yeah, later on down the road while I was out during my back issue, he apparently he either got fired or he got involved in some kind of a lawsuit because of a comment that another manager had said to him, and he ended up creating a giant stink for that company. And the reason is because they didn't identify him as a problem when he was being a wolf. And he ended up getting more and more sour to the point where he actually created a serious HR issue for them. And if they would have just listened to me in the beginning, they could have got him on other reasons instead of waiting until he created this giant, HR nightmare for them.